He shouted at her in front of everyone. His voice didn't shake. It wasn't a mistake. "Get out, you useless medic." The words were sharp and loud, like they had been waiting in his mouth too long. She didn't speak. She didn't defend herself. She just froze. But before she could even move, the dog twisted, growled, and broke from his leash. Not to run, not to attack her, but to block anyone else from coming near. That was the moment everything changed. Let me take you back to where it all began. Tessa Quinn never wanted attention. Not in school, not in training, and definitely not here on this dry, forgotten army base, where even the sun seemed tired of watching people pretend to care. She liked quiet tasks, mornings with her hands in gauze and bandages, scrubbing down tools, checking vitals. Her job wasn't shiny. It didn't come with praise. It was a quiet kind of purpose. But most people didn't notice quiet. Not until someone was bleeding. Even then, they often looked past her. She had been on the base for 3 months. She never caused trouble. She didn't smoke. She didn't talk back. She followed protocol, even when people didn't talk to her unless they needed something. They'd say, "Quinn, you got tape?" Or, "Medic, clean up in Section 5. No one used her first name. Not even him. Commander Beck Holt. He wasn't the loud type, but when he spoke, people listened. He walked like someone who used to believe in things but didn't anymore. He carried his authority like a weight that never left his shoulders. His dog, Ghost, was always with him. The German Shepherd never barked without reason. Never strayed. Never failed a task. Some even said he was smarter than most soldiers. Tessa didn't get in their way. She stayed where she belonged, near the supply room in the back, where the shadows were longer and the judgment didn't sting as much. That morning, Ghost had returned from a scouting run with a limp. No alarms, no injury call. Just a quiet, steady walk back through the gates, his left leg dragging just slightly. Most wouldn't have noticed. She did. She always noticed. Nobody moved, so she did. She approached him slowly, crouched down and whispered, "It's okay, buddy. Let me see." Ghost didn't growl. He didn't pull away. He lowered himself to the ground, almost with relief. She slid her hand under his paw gently. His fur was damp with blood. A wire had torn through skin, deep but clean. She didn't say a word. She opened her kit and worked fast, her fingers steady, wrapping the paw, cleaning out the wound. That's when Commander Holt walked in. His boots hit the floor too hard. His voice came too fast. "What do you think you're doing?" Tessa didn't look up. "He's hurt. I can see that," he snapped. "That doesn't mean you get to put your hands on him." "He let me." "That's not the point," Holt said, louder now. "You don't touch him. Ever. You know your place. Get out, you useless medic." His words cut through the air like a slap. It got quiet. A few heads turned. A couple of soldiers shifted. One cleared his throat. No one defended her. No one said a word. Tessa stood slowly. She didn't look at him. She didn't argue. She simply began to gather her supplies. And that's when it happened. Ghost growled. Low, long, like something ancient had woken up inside him. The leash jerked. The collar strained. He moved between Tessa and the commander and lowered his body in a stance none of them had ever seen from him. Protective. "Tessa," Holt said, softer now, confused. "Step back." Ghost snarled. Someone tried to take a step forward. Ghost lunged. Not to bite, just to warn. The message was clear. No one touches her. No one pushes her away. Not anymore. Ghost stayed where he was, pressed close to Tessa's leg, his body tense but steady. And for a long second no one moved because no one knew what moving would cause, and Commander Holt slowly raised one hand, not in command but in caution, and said, "Easy, boy." Yet Ghost did not look at him, not even once, because his eyes were fixed on Tessa as if she were the only thing keeping him upright, and Tessa felt the heat of that trust without understanding it. Felt it settle heavy in her chest. And, although her hands were still holding the edge of her medical bag, she didn't reach for anything else. She just stood there breathing slow, because fear never helped anyone heal. And she had learned that lesson a long time ago. Someone behind Holt whispered, "What's wrong with the dog?" And another voice answered, "He's never done this?" And Holt swallowed hard because that was true. Ghost had never disobeyed him. Not once. Not in training. Not in the field. Not in moments when commands were shouted through noise and panic. And yet here he was, choosing stillness over order, choosing her over him. Holt took a step back, not much, just enough to give space, and said throughs, "Quinn, I told you to leave." But his voice had changed now, not sharp, not sure, and Tessa finally looked up at him, her face calm but pale, and said quietly, "I will, sir, but he's hurt and he knows it." And Holt opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, because Ghost leaned further into her leg as if agreeing, and that simple movement did something Holt didn't expect. It shook him, because the dog had leaned. Like that once before, years ago, in another place, with another medic who had knelt just as calmly and spoken just as softly, and Holt had not listened then either. The moment stretched, and the base felt smaller, tighter, like everyone was holding the same breath, and finally Holt waved a hand toward the others and said, "Give them space." And no one questioned it, because even confused authority still sounded like authority, and one by one they stepped away until it was just Holt, Tessa, and Ghost, standing in a rough triangle that none of them had planned. Tessa slowly crouched again, careful not to rush, and Ghost eased down with her, his weight heavy against her knee, and she checked the wrap she had placed earlier, adjusting it with light fingers, and said, "You're okay. I didn't finish." Not to Holt, not to anyone else, just to the dog, and Ghost's breathing slowed as if he had been waiting to hear that. Holt watched her work, watched how she didn't hurry but didn't hesitate either, how she checked the edge of the wound, how she tied the cloth firm but not tight, and he felt a strange ache rise in his throat, because this was what care looked like. Not loud, not proud, just present. "You should have told me," he said, and Tessa didn't look up when she answered, "I tried." And that was all she said, not angry, not accusing, just a fact placed between them, and Holt felt it land heavier than any argument could have. He rubbed a hand over his face and said, "Finish?" And she nodded once and kept working, and Ghost stayed still the whole time, not because he was ordered to, but because he trusted her. And when she was done, she sat back on her heels and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "He needs rest," she said, "and clean ground, and someone to stay near him tonight." And Holt almost said, "I will," almost reached forward, but Ghost shifted again, closer to her, and Holt stopped himself, because forcing loyalty never worked. He had learned that too late once before. "You stay," Holt said instead, and the word surprised both of them. And Tessa looked up, unsure, and Holt added, quieter now, "Please." And that was the first time she had ever heard that word from him. She nodded, because the dog needed it, and that mattered more than pride. And as Holt turned away, he paused and said without looking back, "We'll talk later." And Tessa watched him go, then looked down at Ghost, whose eyes were finally closing, and she rested her hand on his neck, feeling the steady rise and fall there. And she thought about how strange it was that trust could form in moments, while damage took years, and how sometimes being seen was the first step to healing, even if you didn't know what came next. And as the lights across the base dimmed and the noise drifted farther away, Tessa stayed right there on the ground beside him, because leaving now would have broken something neither of them could afford to lose. And somewhere not far away, Commander Holt stood alone, staring at his hands, realizing for the first time that the words he had thrown so easily might have cost him the one bond he thought could never change, and that knowledge settled deep, because he understood now that the hardest wounds were never the ones you could see, and this was only the beginning. The ground beneath her was hard and dry, but Tessa didn't move. Ghost's head rested near her boot, his breathing slower now, calmer. She kept her hand on his fur, not stroking, just holding. Around them, the base returned to its routine, quiet chatter, boots walking past, a few curious glances, but no one came close. No one asked if she was okay. No one said a word. And truthfully, she preferred it that way. It was easier when people left her alone. That's how it had always been. She thought about what the commander had said, useless medic. He hadn't whispered it. He wanted everyone to hear it. And they did. But Ghost had heard it too. And Ghost had reacted. That's what stayed in her mind. Not the insult. Not the humiliation. But the moment Ghost had moved in front of her like a wall. He hadn't growled at her. He had growled for her. Tessa whispered under her breath, You knew, didn't you? Ghost didn't open his eyes, but his tail shifted slightly. A soft twitch. That was all. As night crept in, the desert grew cold. Someone from Supply brought out a blanket and placed it nearby, not saying anything. She nodded once, grateful. She didn't need words right now. She just needed this moment. The first moment in weeks she didn't feel invisible. Hours passed like that. When she finally stood, Ghost opened one eye. She leaned down slowly and whispered, "I'm not going far, just getting something warm." He didn't move, just watched her walk. Inside the mess tent it was warmer and smelled like burnt rice. She poured some soup into a plastic cup, grabbed a second one for water, and walked out quietly. She didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to explain what had happened, but someone followed her outside. Tessa. It was Lieutenant Kara Briggs, the only one who occasionally said her name. Tessa turned. "Yeah." Kara looked uncomfortable. "Listen, I know that was rough." "What Holt said." Tessa nodded once. "He said worse in meetings, just not that loud." Kara stepped closer. "I think you should know. People saw what the dog did. They're talking." Tessa stiffened. "About me?" "No. About him. The commander. About how Ghost chose you." Tessa stayed quiet. Kara hesitated, then added, "It's making some of them rethink what they believe." Tessa didn't reply. She didn't trust words spoken too soon after a shift in power. People loved underdogs, until they made them uncomfortable again. "I should get back," she said. Kara nodded. "All right, just take care of yourself. And the dog." "I will." Tessa walked back to the edge of the barracks. Ghost had lifted his head. When he saw her, he rested it again, as if saying, "I told you you'd come back." She knelt beside him again, placed the soup in the dirt nearby, and poured some water into her palm. He licked it slowly. Then a voice came from the shadows. "Can I sit?" Tessa turned. Commander Holt stood there, no jacket, just a plain undershirt, arms folded. His face wasn't hard like before. It was tired, lined, a little uncertain. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. He sat slowly a few feet away. They both looked at Ghost. After a while he spoke. "I trained him myself. Every step. I raised him after my brother died. He wouldn't take food from anyone but me." Tessa didn't interrupt. "But today," he stopped, shook his head. "He chose you." Tessa looked down. "He was bleeding. I helped. That's all." "No," Holt said quietly. "It's not." She finally turned to him. "Why do you hate me?" He blinked. The question landed like a stone. "I don't," he said. "You yelled at me, called me useless, like I wasn't even human." He didn't answer right away. When he did, it was softer than she'd ever heard his voice. "Because you remind me of her." "Who?" "My sister." She was quiet, too quiet. She helped everyone and never asked for anything. Until one day she needed something, and nobody saw her. Tessa watched him. "I see you," he said. She didn't know what to do with that. She'd spent so long being unseen that recognition felt heavier than silence. "You don't have to explain," she said. "Maybe not, but I need to." She said nothing. "I let a good medic go quiet, and I told myself you were just doing your job, not feeling it. But then, Ghost reacted, and I realized I've been looking away. From you. From a lot of things." The words sat between them for a while. "I'm not looking for an apology," she said. "I know, but you deserved better." Ghost stirred slightly and nudged Tessa's knee with his nose. She reached for his head and said, "We're okay, boy." Holt stood up. "If you want to transfer out after this, I'll support it." She looked up at him. "I won't." His brows lifted. "I'm not running from this," she said. He nodded, slowly. "Okay." Then he walked off without saying another word. Ghost licked her hand again. She whispered, "I think he means it." But in her heart, she wasn't sure yet. Still, for the first time, she thought maybe she wanted to find out. The next morning, the sky was already bright when Tessa opened her eyes. She had fallen asleep right there next to Ghost, her head resting on the edge of the blanket someone had laid out beneath them. Her neck ached, and her shoulder was stiff, but Ghost was still sleeping, curled close like he hadn't moved all night. The swelling in his paw had gone down a little. The bleeding had stopped. That was a good sign. She gently eased herself up, trying not to wake him, but he opened one eye anyway. She smiled softly and whispered, "I know you hate mornings too," then ran her fingers slowly along the top of his head. He stretched one leg out, careful not to put weight on the hurt one. "Tessa." The voice made her turn. It was Beck Holt. He wasn't wearing his usual sharp tone, and he wasn't dressed in full uniform either, just the base tee and dusty cargo pants. His hands were in his pockets. He looked unsure. "I didn't want to scare him," he added quickly. "You didn't." He nodded once and took a step closer, then sat on a metal water drum a few feet away. "I've been up for hours," he said, his eyes on the ground. "Couldn't sleep." Tessa said nothing. She wasn't going to make it easier for him than it needed to be. Beck ran a hand over his short hair. "He really didn't come to me last night. Not even when I brought food." Tessa nodded slowly. "He stayed here. Because of you." She gave a small shrug. "He needed someone." "So did I," Beck said almost too quietly. That caught her off guard. She looked at him, really looked, for the first time since everything had happened. His face was tired, not just from lack of sleep. It was something deeper. There were fine lines under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth like he'd been carrying something for too long. He finally met her gaze. "You're probably still angry." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Angry would mean I expected more." He flinched, but he didn't argue. A long silence hung between them, just the low hum of the wind and the distant clang of gear being moved somewhere near the mess tent. Beck stood up again, slowly. "I've got a briefing in 20. But later, would you walk with me?" Tessa looked down at Ghost, who was now watching Beck calmly. "I'll think about it," she said, and Beck nodded once before walking away. As the day moved on, the mood around the base was different. People still gave Tessa those sideways glances, but now they weren't filled with judgment. There was something else there, curiosity maybe, or respect. She couldn't quite tell. A few soldiers even gave her small nods as she passed, the kind of thing that didn't mean much on the surface but felt like something in a place like this. After lunch, Tessa was washing some instruments in the small medical supply tent when someone stepped inside. "Hey!" It was Kara again. "Just checking on you," she said. "Heard Commander Holt asked you to walk with him." Tessa kept her eyes on the tray she was cleaning. "He did. And I haven't decided." Kara leaned against the folding table. "Word is, he's been sitting alone every night. Writing something. Letters maybe." Tessa paused. "To who?" "No one knows. But it's changed him." Tessa didn't respond. She dried the last instrument and placed it back in the drawer. "Whatever happened with you two?" Kara added gently. "You got through to him. That dog knew something the rest of us didn't." Later that evening, as the sky turned gold and the heat faded, Tessa stood outside her bunk with Ghost. His leg was still bandaged, but he had more energy now. He tugged lightly at the leash, just a little, then sat beside her. Beck was waiting near the fence line, hands behind his back, facing the open desert like he was expecting something out there. Tessa took a breath. "Come on," she whispered to Ghost. "Let's see what he wants." When they reached him, Beck turned around slowly. His expression was hard to read, but there was no edge to it now. "I was thinking we'd walk the perimeter," he said. Tessa nodded. "Okay." They walked in silence at first. Ghost limped slightly but kept pace, staying between them like he was making sure neither ran off. Beck finally spoke. "My brother. You never met him." Tessa kept her eyes forward. "No. He was loud. Always talking. Made friends easy. Total opposite of me." She glanced at him. "What happened?" Beck didn't answer right away. His voice was steady but soft. "He was supposed to transfer out. Got caught in a wrong place, wrong time situation. I was there, but I was late. I heard it on comms. I couldn't get to him in time." Tessa looked down. "He didn't die right away." There was a medic. Said she could save him if she had more time. I told her to leave him and retreat. Tessa stopped walking. Beck turned. His eyes were already wet. That medic was you. I know. He blinked, caught off guard. You knew. You said it loud enough back then, remember? She said, her voice low. That it was my fault. That I should have moved faster. I was wrong. I know that too. Beck's voice cracked. He begged me not to blame you. Said you tried. I didn't listen. Tessa stepped closer. You blamed me because it was easier than blaming yourself. He didn't deny it. I hated you for a long time, she said. But not because of what happened. Because of what you let everyone else think of me. Like I didn't try. Like I didn't care. I'm sorry. She looked down at Ghost, who was now sitting, tail brushing the dust. He looked up at both of them, calm and still. You're lucky he forgives faster than I do, she said. Beck laughed quietly, wiping his eyes. Ghost barked once, just a small sound, then leaned against Tessa's leg again. I don't want to run this place without people like you, Beck said. Then listen to us when we speak, she said. Even if we don't shout. I will. The sun had almost disappeared behind the hills now. Tessa felt something shift inside her. Like the weight she'd been carrying was lighter, not gone, but manageable. She looked over at Beck. You know, she said. Ghost chose me before I even knew I needed choosing. He nodded. He's smarter than both of us. They stood there for a while longer, the silence comfortable now, not cold. And when they walked back together, Ghost limped between them again, not choosing one over the other, just walking with both. Tessa didn't sleep that night. She laid down for a while, eyes open, staring at the metal bunk frame above her. Ghost slept beside the bed, just close enough that she could hear him breathing, but not so close that she could reach him without moving. He didn't whimper or shift in his sleep like some dogs did. He just rested, heavy and quiet, like he finally felt safe. At around 2 in the morning, she got up. The base was still. Even the usual humming sounds, generators, quiet chatter, the far-off thud of someone restocking supplies had faded. She pulled on her sweatshirt, slid into her boots, and stepped out into the cold. Ghost followed. She walked slowly toward the side of the base that most people avoided unless they were on maintenance duty. The old shed with the locked lockers and damaged crates. It wasn't officially off-limits, but no one wanted to go there. It smelled like oil and old smoke, like the past. Tessa had come here only once before, weeks ago, when she was first assigned to the base. She'd seen something then, a locked box with a worn sticker that had caught her eye. She hadn't touched it, but tonight felt different. Ghost trotted ahead, limping less than usual. He stopped in front of the door and looked back at her. You sure? She asked him quietly. He didn't move, just stared. She took that as a yes. Inside the shed, she clicked on the old flashlight she kept in her back pocket. The beam flickered, but it worked well enough. Dust floated in the air like ash. She walked to the corner where she remembered seeing the box, and sure enough it was still there, half covered in a torn canvas. The sticker on the front read, Unit Echo, 6th Patrol Division. The name beneath it had faded, but the number matched something she'd seen on a report once. Beck's brother. She hesitated. Then she opened it. Inside were a few photos, a folded bandana, some papers, and a leather-bound notebook. On top of it all was a smaller picture, 2 people smiling, a man and a dog. But it wasn't just any dog. It was Ghost. And beside the man was her. Tessa stared at the photo. She was younger, lighter, wearing a white t-shirt, not fatigues. Her hair was longer, and her smile was real. She didn't even remember the picture being taken. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned it over. On the back was handwriting, small and messy. To the medic who saw me when nobody else did. You saved more than just my leg. You saved me. Aiden Holt. She blinked fast. Ghost stepped closer and rested his chin on her knee. I didn't know, she whispered. I forgot he even. She couldn't finish the sentence. For the first time in a long time, something inside her cracked open. Not in a loud, dramatic way. Just quietly, like a knot being untied that had been tight for too many years. She took the photo and the notebook and held them close as she sat down against the wall. Ghost curled up beside her. When the sun rose, she was still sitting there. Later that morning, Beck found her. He didn't speak at first. He just stood in the doorway watching her. "You knew this was here," she said without looking up. "I did," he replied. "But I hadn't read the letter." Tessa held up the notebook. "He wrote about you, about Ghost, about being scared and not wanting to disappoint you." Beck stepped forward slowly, crouched beside her. "I thought sending him out was the right call. I thought if he made it, he'd earn his place again. I didn't see the fear. You did." She nodded slowly. "That's why he trusted me." Beck looked down. "And I'm the one who told everyone you failed him." Tessa turned her head to him. Her eyes weren't cold. They weren't forgiving either. They were just tired. "I never stopped carrying that," she said. "Every base, every patient, every time someone looked past me. I wondered if they knew. I'm sorry." "I know." Beck took a slow breath. "You can have the notebook. I think it was always meant for you." Tessa stood up, Ghost rising with her. "I'm not the same person I was in that photo," she said. Beck nodded. "None of us are." She started to walk out of the shed, then stopped and turned. "But maybe," she said, "we can still be someone worth knowing." Beck didn't respond right away. He just watched her go, holding the photo in one hand and the letter in the other, his throat tight. Back in her room, Tessa tucked the notebook carefully under her bunk. Ghost jumped onto the bed without permission for the first time ever and laid his head on her lap. She didn't stop him. She didn't speak. She just sat there, one hand in his fur, eyes closed, letting the moment settle in. But deep down, she knew something had shifted, not just in her, not just in Ghost, but in Beck. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of something broken. Maybe it was the beginning of something healing. Ghost didn't leave her side after that night. Where she went, he followed. He limped less each day, but never tried to outrun her. Even when she stepped into the mess hall, where dogs weren't allowed, he waited by the door, quiet, still, watching. Nobody told him to do it. He just did. At first, people tried not to stare. Then they stopped hiding it. A few whispered things. Some just stared longer than they should. But no one said anything to her face. Not even Beck. Not at first. The day after she found the photo and read the notebook, she reported for duty like always. Clipboard in hand, standard checks, no excuses. She walked past a few tents, checked up on Corporal Stein's ankle wrap, handed out cold packs for heat exhaustion, restocked the wound dressings. Ghost stayed close, always within 3 feet. By mid-afternoon, someone finally spoke. "You two glued together now?" It was Sergeant Riley, a sharp-tongued supply guy with little patience for anyone slower than him. Tessa glanced down at Ghost. "He likes my company." Riley snorted. "Well, I guess if a dog can vouch for you, that's something." Tessa didn't smile. Sometimes a dog sees clearer than a man. She moved on without waiting for his reply. Later that evening, Beck finally approached. He found her sitting just outside the comms tent, checking inventory on her lap. Ghost had his head on her boot. "Mind if I sit?" Beck asked. Tessa didn't look up. "You can do what you want, Commander." He didn't take offense. He sat down. They didn't speak for a minute. "I read more of the notebook," Beck said finally. Tessa closed her binder and looked up. "There's a line in there I keep reading again and again," he said. She waited. He wrote, "She didn't look at my rank. She looked at my eyes." Tessa blinked slowly. "He meant you," Beck added, voice quiet. "You saw him. Not the soldier. Not the burden. Just him." She didn't speak. She didn't know what to say. "He never wrote that about me," Beck said. "You weren't looking at him, Beck. You were watching over him. That's not the same." He nodded slowly, like the truth of it finally fit somewhere in his chest. "I didn't know how to grieve him," he said. "So I blamed you." Tessa sighed. "I know." They sat in silence again. Ghost let out a soft huff, like even he was tired of the silence. Tessa chuckled quietly. Beck looked down. I'm working on it, he said. I can see that. He rubbed his palms together, then hesitated. I know I can't undo what I said, but I want to ask something of you. She raised an eyebrow. Stay. Tessa tilted her head. Stay here, he said. On this base. With me. With Ghost. As part of the team. You mean like I wasn't before? No, he said quickly. I mean like it's real now. Tessa folded her arms. What changed? You did, he said. Or maybe I did. I'm not sure. But either way, I want to do it better. With people who see things I don't. Tessa thought for a long moment. I'll stay, she said. But not for you. Not for the unit. I'll stay for him. She looked at Ghost, who wagged his tail once, then laid his head back down. Beck nodded. That's fair. They stood at the same time. Before he left, Beck paused. You know, some of the younger recruits have started calling you something. What? Ghost's medic. Tessa looked down at the dog, then back at Beck. I can live with that. That night, as the base lights dimmed, and people slipped into their bunks, Tessa stayed awake, sitting by the entrance of her tent. Ghost was asleep beside her, tail twitching every now and then. In her hands was the photo again, the one from the box. She traced the edge with her thumb. She turned it over again, rereading the line, You saved more than just my leg. You saved me. She didn't remember doing anything that special back then. She just remembered seeing a scared young man trying too hard to be brave. And she treated him like he was human. That was all. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it still could be. As she sat there, the wind kicked up a little. Sand brushed against her boots. Ghost stirred. She spoke softly. You miss him. Ghost didn't move. I think he misses you too. She pulled her knees to her chest and rested her chin on them. Somewhere inside her, something was healing. But she wasn't all the way there yet. And that was okay. She was getting closer. The next morning was busier than usual. A new supply truck had arrived overnight, and soldiers were moving crates back and forth near the main fence. Tessa kept her distance. That wasn't her job. She had enough to do in the med tent, restocking saline, checking the logbook, preparing new field kits. Ghost stayed by her side the entire time. His paw still bandaged, but healing faster than expected. She spoke to him as she worked. Not loudly, not in any dramatic way. Just naturally, like you talk to a friend who didn't interrupt. 3 more days of wrapping, she murmured, tightening the cloth over his paw. Then I think you'll be back to full duty. Ghost leaned into her slightly. I'm not saying you're ready to chase rabbits again. Just maybe slow walks. Gentle patrols. A voice cut across the tent. That's not your call. Tessa looked up. It was Sergeant Nolan, tall, broad-shouldered, always squinting like he couldn't decide if he didn't trust you or just didn't care. He stepped into the med tent without invitation. I'm taking Ghost out for assessment, he said flatly. Tessa stood slowly, her hand still on the bandage. He's not cleared. I don't need your permission. Yes, she replied. You do. Nolan narrowed his eyes. Listen, Ghost's medic. You don't outrank me. No, Tessa said, calm but firm. But I am the only one he's letting near him. You try, and you'll see what happens. He took a step forward, clearly trying to intimidate her. Ghost stood immediately. His posture changed in an instant. Tail low, shoulders locked, chest forward. Not a bark, not a growl, just presence. Heavy, unmoving. Is that a threat? Nolan asked. No, Tessa said, eyes on the dog. That's a warning. Nolan hesitated, then scoffed. Whatever. Not worth my time. He turned and walked out. Tessa let out a breath and knelt beside Ghost. Thank you. Ghost licked her hand once and sat back down. But the tension didn't end there. Later that afternoon, while Tessa was helping a younger recruit with heat exhaustion near the outer training zone, the same sergeant returned, this time without announcing himself. He stood nearby, arms crossed, watching. The recruit, a private named Jesse, looked nervous. Is everything okay? Yeah, Tessa said. Let's get your fluids balanced. You're just running too hot. Nolan stepped closer. You think the dog's picking sides because he's loyal? Or because you've been feeding him special? Tessa looked up slowly. You want to say that again? He shrugged. Just saying, maybe the dog's behavior is more about you than people think. Jesse looked between them, uncomfortable. Tessa stood. If you have something to accuse me of, do it. Out loud. But Nolan didn't answer. He just smirked and walked off. Later that evening, Tessa needed a break. She grabbed her canteen and stepped out past the supply shed toward the ridge. Ghost followed close, as always. There was a small trail past the fence line that some soldiers used for early morning runs. It wasn't dangerous, but parts of it had begun to erode. Tessa walked slowly, trying to clear her mind. Ghost sniffed the ground ahead of her, then turned back to check on her like he always did. She was halfway up the incline when her foot slipped. The ground under her boot gave way, sand and small rocks tumbling down the slope fast. She lost her balance. Before she could fall backward, Ghost lunged. He gripped her vest with his teeth, pulled hard, planted his front legs wide, and held firm. The ground crumbled beneath her feet, but she didn't fall. She grabbed his collar, steadying herself until she found solid footing. Her heart pounded in her ears. Ghost stayed close, pressing his body into hers until she was back on stable ground. Tessa sank to her knees, gripping his fur, breathing hard. Thank you, she whispered. You saved me. He didn't move, didn't need to. When she finally stood again, her hands still shaking slightly, she said softly, Next time I say I need a break, remind me to bring someone who doesn't try to get me killed. Ghost wagged his tail once. They walked back slowly, step by step. Later that night, Beck came to her bunk. I heard what happened, he said. Are you okay? I'm fine. He hesitated. And the dog? She opened the flap to her tent. Ghost was asleep inside, curled up like nothing had happened. He saved me, she said. Again. Beck nodded slowly. He was never just a soldier's dog. No, Tessa said. He never was. Beck looked at her, really looked and said, You know, the team's been quieter lately. Less joking. Less noise. Because they're watching, she replied. Watching what? She shrugged. To see if I break. Or if he turns on me. Beck looked down. He won't. I know, she said. But they don't. There was a long pause. Tessa, he said, I think they want to believe you're who he says you are. They just don't know how to say it. She stepped out, stood in the moonlight, arms crossed. That's not my job, to convince them. Beck nodded. No, but maybe it's his. They both looked at Ghost, and for a moment neither spoke, because both of them knew the truth, that sometimes the only one who sees who you really are isn't human at all. The next day started like the others. Quiet, dusty, routine. Tessa moved through the base without saying much. She checked vitals, updated notes, changed a few bandages. No one bothered her. No one offered small talk. But they didn't avoid her either. It was a strange shift. Respect, maybe, or curiosity. Ghost followed her like always, his limp barely noticeable now. He had a rhythm 3 steps behind her, 1 to the side. Never in the way. Always watching. But something felt different. Late that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the mess hall, casting long shadows across the gravel, Ghost nudged her hand. Not begging. Not asking for attention. Just nudging. She looked down. What? He stepped forward, then looked back at her. Then again. Then a third time. Where are you going? Ghost walked a few paces, looked back again. She understood. He wanted her to follow. They walked past the medical tent, past the rusting water tanks, toward the far corner of the base where unused storage crates were stacked too high and mostly forgotten. No one came out here. There were no cameras, no checkpoints, just rust and sand. Ghost stopped in front of one of the crates. It was half open, the lock hanging off like someone had broken it a long time ago. The inside was dark. Tessa hesitated. You sure about this? Ghost pushed his nose under the crate's edge and pawed gently. Tessa crouched, pulled the door wider, and stepped inside. It smelled of old canvas and motor oil. Dim light filtered in through a broken panel on the side. The crate wasn't empty. There was an old military trunk in the corner. A dog bowl, a chewed-up tennis ball, and a blanket. Tessa walked toward it slowly. Her boots scraped softly against the metal floor. She crouched and ran her hand over the faded fabric. There were initials stitched into the corner. H. Her breath caught. Aiden Holt, Commander Beck's younger brother. She sat down, her back against the crate wall, and picked up the ball. It was dry, torn at one edge. Ghost stepped in and lay down across from her, watching. This was his space, she said quietly. Ghost didn't move. She looked around. Everything was exactly where it had been left, like someone had meant to come back and just never did. There was a folded piece of paper stuck between the blanket and the trunk. Tessa opened it gently. It was a drawing. Simple. Pencil on a ripped-out notebook page. A figure that looked like a soldier kneeling beside a dog. The lines were rough, but you could tell it had been made with care. On the bottom corner, in handwriting she didn't recognize, was one line. She listens even when nobody else does. Tessa's eyes stung. She set the drawing down and leaned her head back against the wall. Ghost came closer and laid his head on her knee. They stayed like that for a long time. No words, no noise, just shared silence. When she returned to her bunk that night, she carried the drawing in her chest pocket. Close, like a quiet reminder. Beck came by as he had the past few nights. But this time he didn't ask to sit. He just stood outside and said, "He showed you, didn't he?" She looked up. "Yes. I couldn't go in there," he said. "I tried once. I stood in front of that crate for 20 minutes. Couldn't take a single step." Tessa nodded slowly. "He wanted you to, but I think he knew you weren't ready." Beck swallowed hard. "And you were." She shook her head. "No, but he needed someone to carry it forward." He looked down. He always liked to draw. Never showed anyone but Ghost. Tessa reached into her pocket and handed him the paper. Beck held it carefully like it might break. His thumb ran over the line of words at the bottom. His lips parted, but nothing came out. Finally, he whispered, "I don't deserve to have this." "You don't have to," she said, "but you should see it." He nodded once and folded it back, then handed it to her. "Keep it," he said, and she did. That night, for the first time, Ghost slept inside her tent without waiting for permission. And for the first time, Tessa slept through the night without waking up once. Because the past didn't feel like a wound anymore. It felt like something she was finally allowed to carry with peace. 2 days later, Beck didn't come to her tent like usual. Tessa noticed it, but she didn't ask. If there was anything she'd learned over the last few weeks, it was that some people didn't talk when something mattered. They showed it later when they were ready. That night, after her final check on Ghost's leg, she found a brown folder tucked under her blanket. No name on the outside, no rank, just a folded edge and one small line handwritten across the bottom corner. For her, she opened it slowly. Inside was a single piece of paper, a letter. The date on it was from 2 weeks ago. It read, "To command, request, official transfer of MWD number 442, Ghost, from U.S. military service to personal adoption. Proposed adopter, Quinn, Tessa, combat medic. Reason, dog has shown exclusive trust to this individual. No longer performing under original handler, Commander Beck Holt. Condition of animal, healing. Unfit for future deployment. Recommended for early retirement. Signed, Holt, B. A Commander, 6th Division." Below it, in Beck's own handwriting, another note. "He chose her, and I've seen what that looks like now. This dog is no longer a soldier. He's someone's piece. Let him have that. Let her have that." Tessa sat on the edge of her bed, the letter in both hands. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed. The tent flap opened. Beck stood there, quiet, eyes soft. He didn't ask if she read it. He just said, If you say no, he goes back into the system. Rehab, shelters, maybe a vet clinic. No guarantee. Tessa looked up. Why are you giving him away? I'm not, Beck said. I'm giving him home. She looked down at Ghost, who had followed her in again without needing to be told. He was your brother's. Beck nodded. He's more than that now. Tessa was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, what if I say yes? Beck didn't answer at first. Then finally, then maybe you don't leave either. That stopped her. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time there was no commander in the room. Just a man who had been wrong, who had been lost, who had seen something good and was trying to do the right thing now. I was planning to leave, she said. I know. She folded the paper again, neatly, carefully, like it mattered. Because it did. I haven't decided yet, she added. I'm not asking for a decision tonight. She stood and stepped toward him. I need one more night. He nodded. I'll be here. As he turned to go, she said, Beck. He paused. I think your brother would have liked that you changed. He smiled, small but real. I think he would have liked you better than me. Then he left. That night, Tessa laid in her bunk with the lights off, the letter still on the table beside her, and Ghost curled up by her bed like always. But this time he didn't just lay nearby. He placed his head on her chest and stayed there. The envelope came just after breakfast. It was plain. No markings. Hand-delivered by a visiting officer from another base. No announcement. Just a quick "this is for you." Before walking off to join the others, Tessa held it in both hands. It was thin, light, but she didn't open it right away. She sat down on the edge of the supply table, Ghost at her feet, and stared at it like it might bite her. Beck walked in a few minutes later, sipping from a tin coffee mug. He paused when he saw her. You okay? She nodded. I think so. He stepped closer. What's that? A letter. He raised an eyebrow. From who? She looked down at the envelope. I think, from someone who used to matter. Beck didn't push. She slid a finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a single page, typed, signed by someone she hadn't spoken to in over a year. Dr. Helen Reyes, Veteran Support Unit, Boston Medical. It read, Tessa, I know we didn't part on the best terms, but I wanted you to know something. The soldier you tried to save, the one from the Winter Creek op, his family read your report. I sent it to them after all this time. They know the truth now. They know you stayed. They know you did everything you could. They asked me to tell you thank you, and to tell you that they never blamed you. I thought you deserved to hear that before anyone else did. Dr. Reyes. Tessa stared at the words for a long time. Then she folded the letter slowly and placed it on her lap. Ghost nudged her thigh. Beck said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Later that day, the base received 2 visitors, military officers from another region, stopping through for routine coordination. They stayed polite, professional. One of them, Major Alden, was tall and calm, but something about the way he watched Tessa made her uneasy. He caught up to her near the water tanks later that afternoon. Quinn. She turned, cautious. Yes. I wanted to say something. I knew Corporal Jennings, the soldier from Winter Creek. Tessa's stomach tensed. I read your name in the report, he continued. He talked about you, said you had calm hands. That's rare out here. Tessa nodded slowly. He didn't make it. No, but he trusted you. She blinked. How do you know that? Because he said it in the message he left for his sister. Tessa's hands tightened around the canteen in her grip. Major Alden gave a slight smile. You've got a reputation. Quiet, steady. Dogs like you. People listen, after a while. After they've doubted first, she said. Maybe, but the ones who stay learn better. He nodded once, respectfully, and walked away. Ghost sat down beside her, watching the officer until he was gone. The base felt smaller that evening. That night, Tessa stood alone near the perimeter, staring out at the dark ridge in the distance. The wind was calm. The stars were brighter than usual. Beck joined her, standing beside her without saying anything. Finally, she said, "His family never blamed me." "I'm glad," he said quietly. "I think I blamed me more than anyone else did." He nodded. She added, "But maybe not anymore." They stood there for a while longer. No big words, no speeches, just silence. Then Beck said, "There's something else you should see." He handed her a folder. Inside was a printed memo. Subject, Immediate Retirement Approval, MWD number 442, Ghost. Effective immediately, Ghost is considered inactive and removed from military roster. Final assignment left to handler's discretion. Tessa exhaled slowly. Beck looked at her. "You don't have to stay, Tessa. If you want to take him and go, I won't stop you." She looked at Ghost, who had now laid down, eyes open, waiting for her to move. Beck continued, "But if you stay, we'll build something better." She didn't answer. Not yet. That night she didn't sleep. She just lay in bed, one hand on Ghost's back, her eyes wide open, staring into the dark, thinking about forgiveness, about purpose, and about whether choosing peace for once was finally allowed. The transfer papers came the next morning. They weren't requested. They weren't discussed. They were just there. An envelope slid under her bunk flap before sunrise. White, stamped, unmistakable. Tessa held it in her hand and didn't open it right away. Instead, she looked at Ghost. He was already awake, watching her like he'd been waiting. She crouched next to him. "You knew this was coming, didn't you?" He rested his head on her knee again. The papers offered a position at a quieter outpost back home. Closer to Boston, close enough that she could see trees again, drink coffee from an actual mug, hear cars on the street. The kind of place people went when they were being slowly pushed out, but politely. No warning, no conversation, just a quiet goodbye dressed up as opportunity. Tessa stared at the letter. Ghost pressed into her side. That afternoon, she found Beck in the planning tent. She held the envelope up. "You know about this?" He didn't pretend. "I saw the memo." "You let them do this?" "No," he said. "But I didn't stop them." She shook her head, eyes burning. "Why?" "Because I didn't think you'd still want to be here." She stepped back, stunned. "After all this? I thought you might want peace." "I want purpose," she said. "There's a difference." He didn't answer. Outside, the wind picked up. Tessa stepped out of the tent, heart pounding. Ghost was pacing. Not walking, pacing. His ears were stiff. His eyes locked on the ridge beyond the base walls. She followed his gaze. "Something's wrong." Ghost growled low and sharp. Not panic. Not fear. Warning. She turned quickly. "Commander." Beck was already moving toward her. "What is it?" "Ghost's on edge." Beck looked out over the ridge. It was still. Nothing moved. Tessa didn't blink. "He knows something." Just then, the perimeter alarm chirped once. A soft sound. Almost missed. Not a breach, just movement. Tessa grabbed a field pack and jogged toward the outer post. Ghost stayed close. When they reached the watchpoint, Private Jesse was already there. "What happened?" Tessa asked. Jesse pointed beyond the wire fence. Movement. Small. Could be animals. But Ghost went stiff. Didn't even bark. Just locked in. Beck joined them seconds later. They all stared at the empty slope. Tessa felt her throat tighten. Ghost wasn't barking. He wasn't moving. He was waiting. That night, Beck called a quiet meeting with senior staff. Tessa wasn't invited. But she didn't wait for their decision. She went back to the edge of the storage area. Back to Ghost's old crate. She sat inside on the dusty blanket. He followed without hesitation. She laid the transfer papers flat on the ground. Ghost looked at them. Then he laid his paw directly on top of them and pressed down. Tessa smiled. "I guess that's your answer." She tore the envelope in half. Then again, and again, until the papers were shredded. She whispered, "I'm staying." Ghost leaned into her. The next morning, Beck stood waiting by the mess hall. Tessa approached, calm, steady. He opened his mouth to speak, but she handed him the torn envelope. His eyebrows rose. I thought you'd take the transfer. I almost did. What changed? She looked at Ghost. Someone fought for me when nobody else did. Beck nodded, slowly. You staying for him? I'm staying for all the reasons I didn't before. She paused. But I want something in return. Beck folded his arms. Okay. I want a seat in the strategy tent. No more decisions about medical without my input. I want updated resources. And if Ghost is retired, I want him logged as mine, not a unit asset. Beck didn't hesitate. Done. And, she added, I want the next medic we get to know this is a place they'll be heard. He smiled. That might be the most important part. They shook hands. Tessa looked down at Ghost. We're not going anywhere, buddy. He wagged his tail once, but in his eyes something else. A glint of worry, because he knew the stillness wasn't going to last, and the real storm hadn't started yet. Ghost didn't eat that morning. He stood beside Tessa, alert and still, eyes locked on the west side of camp where the fuel tanks were. His ears twitched every few seconds, but not like he was listening, like he was remembering. Tessa noticed it before breakfast. She'd poured water in his bowl, placed his favorite treat beside it. He didn't move. Ghost? She called gently. Nothing. He was locked in. She crouched beside him and followed his line of sight. Just fuel barrels. A few techs walking by. Nothing out of place. But Ghost was never wrong. Tessa stood, eyes narrowing. Beck found her by the comms tent. He hasn't eaten? No. And he's not pacing. He's waiting. For what? She looked at him. Something he knows is already here. Beck looked toward the fuel tanks. There's nothing there. There is, Tessa said. He remembers it. Whatever it is. Later that day, Ghost refused to enter the med tent. Instead, he sat outside, facing the barracks, watching every person who passed by. His eyes locked on one man for too long, a newer transfer named Lieutenant Danner. Young, polite, always smiling too much. Tessa noticed it. Ghost stood the moment Danner walked by. Ears forward, shoulders stiff. Danner paused. Hey there, buddy. Ghost didn't blink. Tessa stepped out. He doesn't like being called that. Danner smiled. Didn't mean to offend. Then don't speak to him, she said calmly. Danner held his hands up playfully. All right. But Ghost didn't move until Danner was fully out of sight. That night, Ghost didn't sleep. He sat by the door of her tent, growling quietly every few minutes. Not loud, just enough for her to wake up. Tessa got up, walked outside, looked around. Nothing. But Ghost didn't stop watching. By morning, Tessa was tired and worried. She walked straight to Beck. Something's wrong, she said. I believe you, he replied. Then let me access the security logs. He blinked. What are you looking for? I don't know, she said. But Ghost does. I just have to figure out why. Beck hesitated, then handed her the keycard. 30 minutes, he said. If anyone asks, I didn't approve it. Tessa walked straight to the command tent. Ghost followed. She scanned the logs. Visitor logs. Transfer sheets. Equipment requests. She found it after 10 minutes. Lieutenant Danner. Assigned 2 weeks ago. Background. Transferred from a private contractor unit. Former assignment. Winter Creek Forward Post. Her blood ran cold. Winter Creek. The same op where she lost Corporal Jennings. The same op Ghost's old handler, Aiden Holt, had died weeks before that. She stared at the screen. No, she whispered. She checked again. Danner's name was listed in a supply drop report dated 3 days before Aiden's final mission. But that report had been edited. Twice. Ghost stood beside her, his breathing faster now. Tessa backed away from the desk. Beck entered just then, saw her face. What is it? She turned the screen toward him. You need to see this. He read quickly, eyes moving fast, jaw tightening. This guy, she said, pointing to Danner's name. He was there before Aiden died. He signed off on supply routes that never arrived. He rerouted drones. He tampered with coordinates. Beck looked at her. You think he set him up? I think, Tessa said. Ghost knows exactly what he did. Just then, from outside the tent, a low, sudden growl. Ghost shot toward the entrance. Tessa followed fast, heart pounding. Lieutenant Danner stood outside, hand on the leash of another K9. A newer dog, one Tessa hadn't seen before. Thought I'd say hi, he said smoothly. Ghost lunged forward, not violently, but with force. He stopped inches from Danner's boots. Danner didn't flinch. You better control that thing. Beck stepped between them. Step away, he said firmly. Danner raised his eyebrows. Excuse me? I said step away. Tessa looked down. Ghost's entire body was trembling. Not out of rage. Out of memory. Out of pain. Out of something only he could remember. She whispered, He was there? Wasn't he, boy? Ghost didn't look at her. His eyes never left Danner. Danner smiled again, cold now. Dogs get confused. Trauma. Memory glitches. Beck didn't move. You're dismissed, Lieutenant. I don't answer to you, Danner said. Beck stepped closer. You do today. Danner stepped back slowly. Ghost stayed tense even after he left. Tessa crouched beside him, placing both hands gently on his fur. We'll find the truth, she whispered. I promise. Ghost leaned into her, finally blinking. Beck exhaled slowly. Whatever this is, it's not over. No, she said, standing. It's just starting. Tessa waited until midnight. The base had gone quiet. No voices, no boots, just wind and low hums from the generator behind the med tent. She didn't tell Beck. Not yet. If she was wrong, she didn't want him taking the hit for trusting her. If she was right, then Danner wouldn't see it coming. She wore her standard uniform, but swapped her boots for sneakers. Less noise, quieter steps. Ghost followed. No leash, no command. He just walked beside her, one step at a time, like he already knew where they were going. She made her way to the equipment shack behind the fuel zone, the one used for private uploads and encrypted drive scans. Danner had used it twice in the last week. Both times late, both times alone. She opened the side hatch using Beck's stolen access code. The screen blinked awake. Ghost sat at the entrance, facing outward, guarding. Tessa slid the USB drive from her jacket. It had one purpose: copy everything Danner had touched. She inserted it. The download began. For percent. 18%. 37%. Outside, Ghost stood. He hadn't moved. 52%. 81%. Then the screen flickered. Encrypted log file detected. She clicked bypass. Another folder opened. Dated 3 days before Aiden Holt's last mission. She opened it. Video file. Audio only. She put the headset on. First static. Then voices. You'll pull the drone feed when I say, understood? We can't just remove air cover, Lieutenant. They won't notice in time. That ridge isn't critical. The loss will look like an ambush. Sir, with all due respect. Shut it. This isn't a democracy. Holt dies, no questions asked. Tessa's hands went cold. The file timestamp matched the exact day Aiden was deployed. Danner didn't just know. He arranged it, and he expected no one to survive. Tessa removed the headset slowly, breathing hard. Her eyes blurred, but she didn't cry. She'd cried enough that year. She copied the file, then deleted the local trace. The moment the download finished, she heard it. Ghost growled. Not loud. Low. Quiet. Direct. She shut the terminal. Go, she whispered. They slipped out the side. Behind them, footsteps approached. Quick. Heavy. Tessa and Ghost moved through the back alley between crates. Ghost kept close. Every time she slowed, he nudged her forward. They didn't stop until they reached the tent. Inside, she grabbed the field radio and turned it to a closed channel. Beck, she whispered. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. Then a voice answered. But it wasn't Beck. Wrong frequency, Quinn. Try again. It was Danner. She dropped the radio. Ghost stood in front of her now, fully alert, ears up, body braced. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Ghost understood. He always had. She reached for the side of her cot and pulled out the folder. Inside, the printed transcript of the recording. She'd made a backup. One for her. One for Beck. She clipped it closed. And waited. Footsteps outside. Closer. Ghost didn't bark. Didn't growl. He just stood there. Ready. Tessa whispered, "Whatever happens, you stay with me. We end this. Together." Outside, someone paused. The flap shifted. Ghost stepped forward, and everything after that happened fast. The flap opened fast. Tessa didn't flinch. Ghost was already standing between her and the door, muscles tight, still, dead silent. It wasn't Danner. It was Beck. He looked winded. His jacket was half-zipped. His eyes locked on the folder in Tessa's hand. "I got your message," he said. "What the hell is going on?" Tessa handed him the transcript. He didn't speak for a full minute. Just read, jaw tightening, eyes scanning the lines. His fingers pressed into the paper until it crumpled slightly. "Is this real?" he asked quietly. "It's his voice," Tessa said. "Timestamp matches Aiden's last deployment." Beck's throat worked. "He set him up." "Yes." "And covered it with drone blackout." "Yes." Ghost moved beside Beck, nudging his leg gently. Not for comfort, to ground him. Beck ran a hand through his hair. "He was at Winter Creek. I thought he was logistics support." "I thought." "You thought wrong," Tessa said. Beck's eyes flashed. Not at her. At himself. He turned, pacing. "Where's Danner now?" "I don't know. He made contact over radio on a locked channel. Means he's been planning this." Beck stopped pacing. "He's not running," he said. "What?" "He's not scared," Beck repeated. "If anything, he's stalling. Waiting." "For what?" Beck didn't answer, because suddenly Ghost growled. Deep, focused. Not at the door. At the back wall. The tent wasn't sealed at the rear. Just canvas. Something moved. Tessa grabbed her flashlight and flicked it on. Slow sweep. Nothing. But Ghost didn't stop growling. Then they heard it. A voice. From outside. "You two make a good pair." Beck reached for his sidearm. Tessa stepped in front of Ghost, body rigid. Danner's voice continued, calm, almost bored. "You ever think the problem wasn't what I did? But how cleanly I did it? Holt was a mess. You think he was a hero? He was a liability." Beck's voice was cold. "Say his name again. I dare you." He froze on the op before that. "Lost a man. You think Ghost protected him?" "No. He just stayed. Like he always does. Dumb loyalty." Ghost's growl deepened. No bark. No movement. Just rage, wrapped in memory. "But you, Tessa, you're new. You don't understand how the real machine works." Tessa took a slow step forward, eyes sharp. "The real machine? Is that what you call betrayal now?" No response. Tessa threw the tent flap open. No one there. But Beck saw it. A shadow darting around the corner toward the storage wing. They ran. Ghost was faster. Tessa didn't call for him. Didn't have to. He moved like thunder, silent but shaking the ground beneath him. They caught up at the comms tower. Danner was already climbing. Tessa shouted, "Stop!" He didn't. Beck raised his weapon. Ghost didn't wait for permission. He bolted up the stairs. Danner made it to the top and turned, trying to pull something from his coat. A hard drive. Ghost leapt. He didn't bite. He knocked Danner back hard. The man hit the metal deck with a sickening thud. The drive clattered out of his hand, skidding across the floor. Tessa reached it first. She didn't ask questions. She crushed it under her boot. "No more hiding," she said. Danner tried to push up on one elbow, dazed. "You think this ends me?" "No," Beck said. "This exposes you." And for the first time, his voice didn't sound like a commander. It sounded like a brother, a man who had waited far too long to fight for the truth. They arrested Danner that night. Quietly. No sirens. No announcement. Beck handed the transcript and the audio file to Central Command himself. No red tape, no delay. They took it seriously, because it was too clean not to. Tessa walked out to the ridge that evening. Same place Aiden had walked every night years ago. Ghost followed, sitting beside her, shoulder touching hers. She didn't speak. She just sat there, breathing in the silence. Until she whispered, "We did it." Ghost laid his head across her lap. And for the first time since she arrived on base, she cried. Not because it hurt, but because it was finally over. They came 3 days later. 2 black jeeps rolled up just after lunch. No dust, no warning, just movement. Neat suits stepped out, not fatigues. 1 man, 1 woman, civilian wear, Department of Defense credentials clipped neatly to their belts. Tessa didn't get nervous. She got quiet. Ghost watched them from the shade of the medical tent, head low, tail still. His eyes never left them. The man approached first. Calm, thin smile. Clipboard in one hand, water bottle in the other. Tessa Quinn. She nodded. Special Agent Norris, he said, tapping his badge. Office of Internal Oversight. This is my associate, Commander Leeds. The woman nodded once, sharp-eyed. We're here for a quick debrief on the Danner situation, Norris continued. Just protocol. Tessa didn't blink. He's already confessed. Audio's been submitted. Norris gave a practiced smile. Yes, very clean work. Very brave. Leeds stepped forward. We've reviewed your service record. It's underappreciated. That's something we'd like to fix. Tessa raised an eyebrow. How? Norris gestured to the side. Could we speak privately? She looked down at Ghost. No, she said. He stays. The 2 agents exchanged a look, then nodded. They walked together to the edge of the base. Ghost trotted beside Tessa, silent, alert. Norris began. Look, here's the truth. Danner was 1 man, but his actions happened under a wider umbrella. And some people would rather this story end where it has, with his arrest. Not with headlines. Not with questions. Tessa folded her arms. You want me quiet. Leeds cut in. We want you reassigned. Boston base. Full staff medic. Promotion. Salary bump. K9 retirement approved. Ghost becomes yours. All clean. All in writing. Tessa stared. Norris continued. All you have to do is not raise alarms. No interviews. No memos. Let the file close here. Even if others knew? She asked. Leeds said nothing. That was the answer. Tessa looked at Ghost. He blinked once. The air between them was heavy. Not with fear. With knowing. She turned back to the agents. I didn't come out here for headlines, she said. Then you'll accept? Norris asked. She shook her head. I didn't come out here for silence either. They paused. Tessa added, I'll take the reassignment. I'll take the dog. But I'm keeping a copy of that file. And if anything happens to this base, to Beck or to Ghost, I'll leak it myself. Leeds stepped forward, voice low. That's not how this works. Tessa didn't move. That's how it works now. Norris sighed. You're brave, Quinn. But brave gets lonely. Tessa turned. I've been lonely. I'm not anymore. They didn't smile when they left. Later that day, Beck found her near the storage crates. You talked to them? She nodded. They threaten you? They tried. And I threatened back. Beck smiled. A real one. You're not leaving, are you? Tessa looked at Ghost, then at him. I was offered everything I used to want, she said. And I think I've changed. That night, Ghost slept with his head across her boots. Outside, the base was quiet. No more shadows. No more waiting. But morning would come. And with it, a new mission. It started with a collar. Not Ghost's current one, that was standard issue. Tag. Serial. Basic. No, this one was found by accident. Tessa was going through the bottom of the storage trunk. The same one in Aiden's crate she hadn't touched since that night. She'd gone looking for gauze. Extra blankets. Nothing important. But under the spare leash, beneath a folded hoodie that still smelled faintly like sand and sweat. There it was, a worn-out leather collar, the tag half-faded. But it was Ghost's. Older, much older. She turned it over in her hand. On the inside, barely visible, were small scratch marks. Too small for words at first. But then she looked closer. Not scratches. Letters. Carved by hand. Slowly. Carefully. TQ. Her initials. Below it. He'll choose her. Her breath caught. She sat down, the collar in both hands. Ghost came closer, head low, nose sniffing the leather like he remembered it. Because he did. Tessa ran her fingers along the words again. How? Ghost nudged her shoulder. Then she understood. Aiden must have known. Before he died. Before it all fell apart. She stood up, walked to Beck's quarters and didn't knock. He opened the flap and saw her holding the collar. She handed it to him. He read the inside. He didn't speak for almost a full minute. Then, voice low. He always said Ghost had a way of knowing people. That he didn't obey commands. He obeyed hearts. Tessa said, he wrote my initials. Before he ever met me. Beck looked up. Maybe not in person. But he read your med logs. He knew the name of the field medic who stayed behind when the rest pulled out. He said, he hoped Ghost would find her. Tessa felt the sting behind her eyes, but she didn't cry. Not this time. He did, she whispered. Beck nodded. And so did I. They sat in silence for a while, the collar between them. Outside, Ghost lay in the doorway, eyes closed, finally resting like he was safe. Like he knew the past had been seen, heard, understood. The next morning, a drone landed at base. Not military, private. From the hatch, a box was delivered, marked for Quinn, T. Inside, folded gently, was a clean, printed copy of Aiden Holt's final journal entry. One Beck never knew existed. Tessa unfolded it, hand steady. It read, if you're reading this, then Ghost made it. He always makes it. And maybe you did too. Whoever you are, I think I know you. Because if Ghost chose you, then you're the kind of person I'd want to save me. You probably think you failed someone. We all do. But Ghost doesn't follow failures. He follows the ones who don't give up. So don't. Take care of him. And if you ever meet my brother, tell him I'm proud of him. Even if he took too damn long to listen. Tessa folded the letter slowly and held it to her chest. Beck didn't ask to read it. He didn't need to. Ghost sat beside her, tail softly wagging. There were no more secrets. No more guilt. No more running. Only what came next. 3 weeks later, the mission wasn't about war. It was a search. A collapsed outpost in the north. Unresponsive for days. No comms. No drones. Just static. Normally, Tessa wouldn't be on that kind of team. But Ghost had been requested. Specifically, they loaded into the truck at sunrise. Quiet. Focused. Beck drove. Tessa sat in the back, one hand on Ghost's harness. He didn't wear his old collar anymore. She kept that wrapped in cloth in her pack. It wasn't his job anymore to remember pain. That part was over. This was something else. They reached the outpost at dusk. The place was half buried. Sand and wind had done damage. The roof had caved in on one side. No heat signatures. Just silence. Tessa crouched by the entry point, pulled on her gloves. You ready? She asked quietly. Ghost looked at her once, then moved. No hesitation. No command. He ducked through the wreckage, nose low, tail steady. He searched differently now, not like a tool but like a partner. Beck followed behind, checking structural stability. Tessa swept with her scanner. Minutes passed. Then Ghost stopped. Still. Nose pointed to the far left corner under fallen concrete. Tessa joined him. Something under there? He stepped back. Beck helped her pry open the side panel. Carefully. Slowly. Then a sound. Coughing. Human. They worked faster. A young soldier was beneath. Trapped. Dehydrated, but alive. Pinned by debris. He looked up at Ghost and whispered, You came back. Tessa smiled softly. No, she said. He led us here. They pulled the soldier free and radioed for evac. Later, as the truck drove back toward base, the young man asleep behind them, Beck said, "You know, I think your dog's better at this than we are." Tessa looked at Ghost. "He's not a dog," she said. Beck nodded. "No," he said. "He's family." Ghost lay between them, eyes half shut, tail curled gently. Tessa rested her head against the window. She didn't say much else, because there was nothing left to explain. What needed to be healed had been. What needed to be seen finally was. And what needed to be kept was never going to be lost again. Thank you to my amazing family for staying with me until the end of this story. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this journey, I just know you'll love what comes next. I've prepared something even more exciting and surprising that I can't wait to share with you. Just click on the end card appearing on your screen right now to watch the next one.